presentation to go.
This special meeting of the Judson Board of Trustees is hereby called to order at 4:59 p.m. I am very pleased that you have taken time to join us this evening. In compliance with the State Government Code on Open Meetings, tonight's agenda has been appropriately posted. These proceedings are being video and audio recorded and will become part of Judson's permanent legal record. In order that the tape adequately reflects these proceedings, please silence your mobile devices and refrain from talking while others are speaking. Once again, I extend to each of you a sincere welcome from the entire school board. Thank you for your interest in Judson ISD. We have established a quorum and we'll do a roll call vote. I'll start with Ms. Eaton.
Deborah Eaton, present.
Ms. King.
Shatanya King, present.
Mr. Diaz.
Rafael Diaz, present.
Ms. Canoyer.
Suzanne Canoyer, present.
And Ms. Rodriguez is visiting us by Zoom today. Ms. Rodriguez, can you hear us?
Present via Zoom. I can hear you. I hear you better when you speak very directly into the microphone, Renee. I'm so sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely, I will. Jennifer
Thank you.
Rodriguez is here, and I'm Renee Pichelle. I'm here. We do have a quorum. I don't suppose there's any public comment?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We do have Ann Henderson here to speak on paraprofessional pay. Ms. Henderson.
I got it.
Can I move this keyboard?
I beg your pardon?
I was asking, can I move the keyboard out of the way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ann Henderson, and I am a proud member of the AFT. And I have been working, first I started off as a parent, and then a volunteer, and then a substitute teacher. And now I'm a paraprofessional, and I've been a paraprofessional for almost 10 years now. And at the moment, I am going to school to become a teacher. The reason I am up here is because I'm concerned about our paraprofessional pay. Some of us paras have 2 jobs just to try to make ends meet. We work all day, and then we have to, some of us go to another job just to try to make do with what we get paid. Now, like myself, I said, I go to school, so I go to school, and then I go to work, and then I go to school. And we are dedicated people. There's a lot of dedication here as paraprofessionals. We do our jobs. There's no one day that we are not doing something all day long. And it's not that we're griping or anything. We love to work with the children. That's our job. We love to work with them. So we're not complaining or anything. But my perspective is, I feel when we go to the convocations, we feel amped up. You guys tell us that we're part of the backbone of the school. But I feel that some of the McDonald's people, Bill Miller's people, they make more than us. And I feel like we do a lot. We're loving on our kids, we're changing diapers, we're doing this and that, and then I feel like we get underpaid for all the work that we do. We're working constantly all day long. We do so much. We help the teacher out when they're not in, and a substitute. I am in pre-K, so when my pre-K teacher is out, I'm stepping into that teacher role. And that's my job, and I'm not complaining. Like I said, I'm not complaining, but I feel like we don't get the pay that we should get. I love that when you guys give us the raise, but it feels like once our taxes are taken out, I don't see anything left on there. I don't see the raise that we've gotten. I feel like we should be paid a little more. I feel like we do a lot. And I feel like I said, we don't get the acknowledgement that we should get. I'm sorry, I went off my script. Like I said, I'm not complaining. Oh, and another thing that I was kind of concerned about was the summer school. I found out that summer school gets probably double the pay that us paraprofessionals get. And summer school paras, they don't work as long and they don't do as much as we do when we're in the school. They probably work half the time that we're working. And I would know that they do half of it because I used to work summer school. So I know they don't do all the things that we do as when we're working during the school time, but yet in summer school you can get paid almost twice as much as the regular paras that work through the whole school against. And I'm not sure why. I would love to get answers why. I'm sorry, is my time over?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much
Thank
for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay. We move on now to item 3, discussion items and reports. A, School Board Consultant Patricia Arvett. I never get it right, Patricia. Will give the Judson Board a briefing and training on board officer positions and their duties. Patricia?
Thank you. All right, good evening, or good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good to see all of you again. I'm going to make this brief, but I think given that you are coming up on officer elections, I think it's a great idea to just review the roles and responsibilities of officers and also even think about it in a different way, especially given some of the work we've done over the past few months and the board has put in. And so I just wanted to go through them. I don't think I'll take a lot of your time up. I know you've got a busy evening, so thanks for having me here. So, school board officers, there are a lot of legal requirements for the officers, and then there's also local requirements for the officers. And then there's also kind of the unsaid requirements, which are, who are the leaders that we need for this school district at this time? And that's what changes. And every school board member has the capacity and the capabilities of becoming one of the officers, but is it the right time for each school board trustee? And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through all 3 sets of those responsibilities. We're going to talk about the culture building, we're going to talk about the legal requirements, and then what Judson ISD actually requires in your own operating procedures. So we'll just look at all of those, and then we're going to address some of the questions that bubble up for that. And so this is more of a dialogue about this, so please feel free to chime in, and I'll create space for us to talk about it. All right? So when we think about like boards that make a difference, Carver is kind of the standard of good boards, and we talk about that. And the board president is the leader of the board's process, not the board, right? So the board they're not the board's boss. The board, is not the superintendent superior. The board president basically sees to it that the board gets its job done, as the board has defined that job. So when you talk about your board operating procedures, policy that you put in place, the legal authorities that you have, the president is the one who makes sure that that gets done, that those processes are owned and lived up to. So that's just, I think, a good definition of a board president, so I wanted to talk about this. And I apologize, this is really small, but this is what came right out of your operating procedures. And so when we think about that, we're looking at the duties of the president, so preside at all board meetings unless unable to attend. The ones in bold, if you can see those are the ones that are also legal, like you are required by the state to do these. The board president can appoint committees, can call special meetings, must sign all legal documents required by law, review and approve the meeting agendas, so making sure that those meeting agendas reflect the work of the board and the needs of the district, have the right to discuss, make motions and resolutions, and vote on all matters coming before the board. So when we think about that, we're essentially saying that the board president is not separate from the board. They have all the same rights and responsibilities as every board member. They get to participate in the conversations, in the dialogue, and in the debates. And then the vice president has a shorter list of responsibilities, but basically is, and I'm sorry, that's up there 3 times now, just to reiterate it, act in the capacity of president in the absence of incapacity of the president, and automatically becomes president of the board if a vacancy in that office occurs. The first one is legal. The second one is something that is in your operating procedure, so that is a local policy. That's not a requirement, a legal requirement. When we look at the secretary, so boards are required to have a president and a vice president, and a secretary, but they are not required to have a vice president. That is a local policy. The secretary acts in the capacity of the president if both the president and the vice president are gone, right? They also keep certified agenda, the minutes, they manage that. That can also be held or passed over to the district secretary, district board secretary. Ensure that an accurate record is kept of the proceedings of each board member. That can also be delegated. Ensure that notices of the board meetings are posted and sent as required by law. And that can also be delegated. And then sign or countersign documents as directed by the action of the board. So if required, the secretary can sign documents. So when you guys look at those, do those make sense to you? Are there any questions about those requirements? Makes sense? You've seen them in your operating procedures. You've been living with them. Okay. And so then there are additional duties. So when we think about the additional duties of specifically a board president, there are options for local districts to bring in more duties that are relevant to the state of the board and where you are in the state of the district. So if your needs require this. So monitor board conduct to ensure consistency with board policies and procedures and with law. So are we really making sure that we're staying within the operating procedures, that we are honoring all the policies? That is something that could be introduced as a duty. The bolded ones here are ones that I feel are very pertinent to the governance framework that you guys have established and worked on over the last few months with the leadership team. And so I think those are important to note. Using any reasonable interpretation, conduct, and monitor board meetings, deliberations to ensure, I can't read that on, ensure they fall within the parameters of the board adopted governance process, policies, and board superintendent relational policies. And so those are similar, like with the board goals, with the board constraints, with the superintendent constraints. When we look at that, are we monitoring? Are we interpreting it? Are we making sure we're living within that governance framework? And the board president could have that authority. Preside at all board meetings as provided by Robert's Rules of Order. Those are just to give you a framework to monitor your meetings, to conduct your meetings. Some board presidents have the ability to debrief and look at self-assessments. I think self-assessments, board self-assessments will come into play under this new governance framework. So whether or not your board president monitors that and debriefs that evaluation, they could. Timely meetings, except for appropriate duties and functions of the board president. They can meet the same restrictions as all other board members, and they do not supervise or direct the superintendent on implementation, but simply have a role in the evaluation. Drive conversations about innovation and growth. That's something that I know that is very important to this school district and to the board. So who is the one who leads that? It could be a committee structure, or it could be board conversation within your boardroom, and your president certainly could lead those conversations or drive them at the very end, least. Maintain adherence to the Lone Star governance framework by the board. That's the framework that y'all have been working on. Maintain and develop board agendas with a mind to maintaining that governance. And that goes to the time restrictions that we talked about, the way that those board agendas are set up, how those are developed, and how those interact with the board goals, superintendent constraints, board constraints, how that all wraps into it. So I'm going to stop there and just see if you guys have any questions or thoughts about this. And if you see any one of these duties that might be pertinent to this board and this district at this time, because that's the changing thing, is we've got to have the right leadership, the right board structure that leans into that framework so that we can create the conditions for success that we're all hoping for. So any thoughts or questions on that? Anything that comes up when you read these?
Just the drive conversations about innovation and growth. I think you did mention that it's all of our responsibilities. So, I mean, the board president plays a role in doing that, but the entire board does. And so I would almost want you to put in parentheses, the whole board does that. It's not exclusive to just the board president, but everyone on this board. So when I see additional duties for board president, I'm thinking specifically what would be within that umbrella, and that's for everyone, just in my opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All board members would participate in those conversations, could bring those issues up too, but the president could be the one who helps place it on the agenda or creates a committee for it or does some things that drive it down the path.
I had a board president once refuse to put my item on the agenda, which was against our board operating policies. So any board member can put something on the agenda. It's our right to do that. President facilitates
I'm
that.
so sorry to interrupt. Mr. Diaz, I think you're speaking, but I can't hear you. So I don't know if there's or somebody is speaking and I can't hear them.
It's Mr. Macias.
Now I hear you.
You hear
Okay.
Jenny? Good to see you over there, by the way. Hi. So that's all. I mean, one of the things that I've been a big advocate for is that we rotate board president. We rotate our leadership position so every board can understand that role, but more so because it emphasizes the fact that we're all the same. There is no city council mayor concept here. It's board trustees, all one voice, all equal. And so that just needs to be enforced. So this is fantastic, but I always have the mindset that it really applies to many of us. But
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the point is, too, is that while everyone definitely is equal on the board and everyone has the capability of being any one of these officers, does that person have the capacity? Does that person have does the board need a specific skill set at a specific time? And so thinking about in those terms is why I just wanted to bring some of these to your attention. I think that is true for any board at any point.
they are good points. I'm not saying they're not.
I think one thing that's going to be a shift for us is developing board agendas, maintaining the Lone Star recommendations. And for our audience, what we're talking about is how much time we spend on things that directly affect our goals that we have adopted. And so making sure that when we develop that agenda, that we're prioritizing those particular agenda items so that we do go back and reflect on that.
Yeah.
And so that's going to take a little adjustment. I don't know if you're aware, but President Pichelle has asked other people to come in and help set the agenda. So I'm at all, as Vice President, I'm at all those meetings, and then it rotates with the other board members. And I'd like to see that continue, because I think having an extra set of eyes towards that end is going to make it make that a little easier, rather than just one person being responsible for maintaining and watching what we're doing in terms of setting the agenda that way.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Can I ask a question? When you say other people,
Board members.
more than we have in there now?
No, but it's Ms. Pichelle and myself, and then an additional board member
Right.
each time.
Right.
And I would like to see that continue, is what I'm saying.
Oh, well, yeah, definitely, yeah. But I did have a question. I'm sorry. I'll come, because when you said that, I thought you meant we were going to bring in an additional person. And I remember when we talked about that once before, it was like, no, because we'll have a quorum. So I was just
Right.
wondering if I understood you right. I'll bring that question back.
Okay, no
I gotta
worries.
search the file cabinet.
You stop me when you get
So is anything that's pertinent to LSG that's on here, should it be adopted into our board operating procedures?
That's something that the board needs to have a conversation about, because to your point too, there are a few things that are going to be different when we are under the new governance framework. And so that might be something when you revisit your operating or procedures that we talk about. But it's certainly something that we should consider, or you should consider, as you're thinking about your next board officer election. Like that, there might be some differences. Make sense? So the secretary, there are a couple different things. Once again, could go back into the self-evaluation. The secretary could be responsible for recording that. We have forms that will continually track that, just like we expect our students to continually improve, we expect our educators to continually improve, we expect the board to continually improve as well from a governance perspective. And so that's tracking that. And then utilize the record board utilize and record the board meetings in the Lone Star Governance time tracker. And that's that time tracker that's going to say, we're going to spend 50% of our time talking about student success and student outcomes, and really holding ourselves accountable to that as a board. So those would be some possible additional duties for the secretary. And so to think about when you vote on a secretary, that do you have not that you don't have everybody has the capability, but do you have the capacity, given your own life, your own jobs, your own work, to do these and to perform these duties? And so talking about Lone Star Governance, I just wanted to go through some of the parts of the integrity tool, and this is great for the community that's here as well, because the next page will show you kind of where there are areas where we would lean in as a board, and where an officer, whether it's the president or the secretary or the vice president, might lead into those. And so this is the work that you've already done. You've really already done a lot of this. We haven't quite finished it all up, but you've worked on your student outcome goals, you've done a root cause analysis, you've dug into the data, the leadership team has done some tremendous work around the progress measures and really thought about vertical alignment and how to bring that to the campuses. The board has your constraints outlined, and you have the superintendent constraints, and the leadership team, once again, has worked really hard to put very strong and predictive constraint progress measures around those. So that'll come up. So that's kind of the work you've already done. But this is the work that we have yet to do. And this is where we really start to work on that structure. Like, how are we operating? How are we creating the conditions for success? The board, remember, we talked about this a lot in our governance. The board is responsible for creating the conditions for the superintendent and her team to be successful, so our students have the highest academic abilities and achievement. That's kind of that structure. So what are we doing to be efficient and effective and equitable? Accountability. So that goes to that time tracking. Are we actually spending half our time on improving student outcomes? What does that look like in our board meetings? How does the board officer hold the board accountable to that? The board evaluates but does not interfere with progress towards those outcomes. So that's monitoring the progress. That's oversight. That's all of the things, the formative assessments that we are going to do every month in the boardroom. So how are we looking at that, making sure that those progress reports are predictive, that they're giving you the information they need? That's part of building the structure of the board meeting as well. So it could be a different role for that board officer, specifically the president. Advocacy. So how does this board make sure you're engaging with your community, you're advocating for your students? What does that look like? How do we talk about that and bring that into the boardroom and into board work? And then unity. The board works collaboratively with the superintendent to lead towards the vision of the district. So how are you leading transparently, collaboratively, and efficiently? Yes, ma'am.
So, advocacy. I like to talk to people in the district to try and get some feedback from them on how they feel the district is doing. Is there anything we can do differently? And I would like to continue to do that, because I do it now, and not be made to feel that I'm stepping on somebody else's toes. I mean, how can we advocate for the district if we can't talk to people in the district?
Well, I think, of course, all board members can talk to their community and should be speaking with their community at all times.
Yes.
Because it's the community's vision that you are living out in the boardroom. You're their elected officials, you're their voice in this boardroom. And so having those conversations is critical. And these are not unique to board officers. These are for every board member that will have to lean in. So maybe advocacy needs some structure built around it. If there's a tension around that, then that's something that the board could address. And it's something that the board officers could drive, could bring to the attention of the board. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this? Does this make sense, given the framework that y'all have been working on? That there might be some differences in how we're going to structure these board meetings moving forward?
So fair to say that the president is the chief moderator under this new framework?
Yes.
And if there is a discrepancy in the interpretation of the policies, how does that resolve itself?
Well, I would hope that that would resolve itself through dialogue and transparency and communications, right? There's, if there is discrepancies, if there is we've built a fairly clear framework, right? So if there's fuzziness on the edges, or if there's discrepancies or disagreement, then as a board, and hopefully with collaborative leadership from all of you, we will have productive dialogue that will bring us back to center, bring us back towards understanding that framework. And, and if there are disagreements, then like this board has done in the past, we'll have productive dialogue as well about that and come to conclusions on that. I'm sorry?
I said some spirited.
It's all right. So that's just really the framework. Trustee Rodriguez, did you catch all of that? Do you have any questions or thoughts?
I caught all of what you were saying. I couldn't hear all of the questions or comments that my colleagues made. So I'm committed to going back and watching the recording again, just so I can make sure I've caught all of that. But I think one thought that I would love to get this presentation sent to all of us, because I think I'll find myself referring back to this, but particularly on this slide, I think these are really, really great. And I think there's ways in which we might interpret that as individuals that might be different from how, each of us interprets it. And so I think that it will be an ongoing conversation of checking ourselves on this. How are we understanding this collectively, and not just as individuals? And so, and living into these, values or pillars. But I'm excited for that conversation to come. And I apologize if that's a repeat of what somebody else said.
No worries. All right, thank you. Yeah, we'll be having a lot of these conversations as well, especially in this realm as we move forward. So the third kind of intrinsic that is often not delineated in operating procedures, isn't in the policies, isn't legally required, is the culture piece. Is the school board president, the school board officers as a leader from a cultural perspective. And so I put some things down. These are directly out of some, we've done studies, there have been studies, and I'm happy to share those with you guys, that have shown that these type of roles, these kind of intrinsic culture building roles that officers take, do lend to more effective school boards. To school boards, and when I say effective, I mean school boards who actually work with districts that improve outcomes for kids, right? And so these may seem like they're kind of soft, but they're incredibly important. And this also speaks to the point where we talk about no single person will embody all of these things, right? Will hit all of the expectations, but it is worth thinking about, do you have the right person for the right time in the right role? And that's where I think some of these kind of softer culture building traits come into play. You know, do we have a bridge builder? Do we have somebody who can, you know, bring the board together? Do we have that can establish very clear roles with the between the board president and the superintendent? Can they work together? That's a critical relationship, right? The board president, as President Pushal knows, and the superintendent work very closely together. Not that it keeps any single board member out of that relationship, but there has to be one kind of lead. Otherwise, there'd be 7 different conversations, and Superintendent Ball would not have any time to do the work that she's been hired to do, which is to improve outcomes for kids and to manage the district. Knowing your role in the evaluation process. As we lift up accountability in a different way, what is the officer's role? How, you know, are they trusted? Do they understand how to communicate that and to play a role in that is that leads it? Transparency and communications. And then back to your point, also, Trustee Eaton, is, you know, are they a good communicator with their community, with parents, with the district, with the team, with the staff? What does that look like? Because the board speaks as one voice, right? We don't have 7 board members going out delivering a separate message regarding the district. The board speaks as one voice, and the board president is usually the front of stage for that, is usually the mouthpiece from a PR perspective to say, this is what we're going towards, this is what we're believing in. And so is that somebody you trust to be the voice of the board and thinking about that? And so these are important intangibles, and they're going to change based on the circumstances, depending where the board is. Any questions on those, or any thoughts, or any additions that you think are incredibly critical at this point?
Just a question for you.
Okay.
Since you've seen the implementation of different of new programs into this model, what are the pitfalls that we need to watch out for in order to just be aware of them, not necessarily avoid them, but just be prepared for them?
Right. I think the biggest pitfall is distraction, right? If you get distracted moving away from the governance structure that you have all built and put in place. Your superintendent, your district will implement best when they know what your expectations are. And when you get distracted by things that happen in the world and in the school district, and you start to kind of move away from that governance framework, then there's always a cost and a benefit, right? So the cost is it takes your team away from what you wanted them to focus on, right? Because now they're chasing something else to make sure you have the information you need, and that's not to say that things don't come up, but that is the biggest thing that we see that can tank a good governance framework is we get distracted, we move away from our framework, now all of a sudden we're way out of it, and all the work we've done, we're not following through on. We're not creating the conditions for success. We're not asking the questions that lead to the goals. We're not living within that framework. We're not balancing a budget and building a budget that allows the district to reach student success where they want to reach it, right? And so distraction to me is the biggest enemy of a really strong governance framework. So staying focused, continue, and as I said, things happen. You know, we certainly didn't know there was a pandemic that was going to hit us, right? That derailed a lot of governance, rightly so. We had to go into emergency mode. People had to refocus, right? You know, and so now we need to get back to building a framework so that our kids have the opportunity to recover, the opportunity to get back where they need to be. Our educators are supported the way they need to be supported, And that's going to require a very strong framework for the board. And collaboration and communication and transparency, all of those things that this board is already committed to.
Well, I think the fundamental flaw in the governance, and obviously I'm here to talk about budget, so I don't want to go too long, but we have other sessions, we'll talk about this stuff, and we've talked about it before, is the mindset that we're all one. We are all one, but there's sometimes a connotation that means we cannot disagree with a board position. And so for me, I represent District 4, and if I disagree, I'm going to disagree all day long until it's tomorrow and the next day. So I would just be careful to say one person speaks on behalf of the whole board. Technically, you're right, the board president does represent the board, but I reserve my right to speak my own voice, representing my own community for as long as they'll have me. And that's the part that we need to insert, because I think people will then default their commentary to the board president and say nothing. And that's where we've been in the past. So we can't have everything funnel up to the board president. They speak on, we should have our own opinion. So without digressing too much, that's just my point, and we'll tackle that in additional sessions just from a governance standpoint.
Yeah, and I think we can have more dialogue about that. And it's certainly not, look, I've rarely been in front of a board with 7 or 9 board members who all agree on every single thing, right? And it would be abnormal if it were the case. So, you know, it goes back to that productive dialogue. Can you have conflict that leads to outcomes? Can you have that? And, you know, having that one voice, I think you have all the conversation in here, right? And then an official statement that comes out from this district, it has to be in collaboration with your superintendent so that that is the best for the district as well. And so we can talk about how that looks and how that builds up into a board president role and how this board particularly wants that to be communicated. But once again, we have one superintendent and we have 7 board members. So how do we bring that group together so that the district is moving in one direction? And that doesn't, and to your point, Trustee Macias, it certainly doesn't mean that all of you have to, you know, not speak your piece or rubber stamp anything or do any of that. In fact, your responsibility is oversight. So that dialogue is incredibly important, and all of your experiences and your community input and things that are coming back up to you from your school district, it's critical for you to bring those into these board meetings. That's part of your leadership. Any other thoughts around this? Does this culture piece make sense when we talk about, you know, matching board leadership to where we are as a district at this time? Thinking about that board leadership can change. So board leadership, like for instance, if you were, if something was happening in the district that you really needed to have an uber tight relationship with your superintendent, say a brand new superintendent. If you had a brand new superintendent, you might want to get a more experienced board president who has gone through that kind of relationship with the superintendent. I'm not saying that that's an absolute. I'm saying those are kind of an example of what a situation would be like. Is that?
You know, I agree with you on that, Patricia. Also, I would hope that, I'm sorry, Jenny, can you hear me? Sorry. I would hope that.
Thank you.
In working with the 7 of us working together, that anyone who took the initiative to run for a position on the board and took the time to do their research and see what that entails, what it involves. Because like when I came on the board, I was totally green to school board type things. I have a degree in education, but I've not taught in the classroom other than student teaching. So I thought, oh wow, man, I really, really landed in a good spot because I actually have retired teachers from our district on the board and educators from other school districts. And so I felt like I hit the jackpot. And with that being said, I also still feel that I have confidence in my colleagues, in each one of them, that any one of them could sit in these positions.
Absolutely.
And so, it has been suggested that we have, like, every May or every other May, however we do it, that we simply, have a rotation of the positions so that each board member has that opportunity to step into that leadership role and see firsthand what it is, not just observe it from the sideline. And if you don't want to, it's okay, because I've said several times, being board president is not something that I've ever been interested in doing. Secretary, I would love to do that at least once. But I have enough confidence in each of my colleagues that I feel confident any one of us can fill the positions. And I trust my colleagues. So, yeah, I just had to share that, because something extremely insensitive was done the last time we changed positions. And I thought to myself, why would you want to think that we have someone serving on our board right now that is incapable of serving as the president, vice president, or the secretary? Because then we're failing ourselves as a board if we're accepting people that can't do the job, But anyway, I'm done.
Yeah, and I think, that's what I said earlier, and I absolutely agree. And if you choose to go with a rotating model down the line, that's something that is your prerogative. I believe every board member who's been elected to this board and to most boards that I've worked with has the capability of being in this officer position, but not always the capacity. And sometimes there's different skill sets that we bring, right? For instance, if you had a board where maybe 3/4 of your members are brand new, you might want a very seasoned board president because they're also a mentor. They're also the one who helps board members lift up. So that's my point.
Right. And that's a common sense thing.
Right.
I agree. You wouldn't want to just throw somebody in there and they don't know. But for that same reason, we need to rotate so that everybody has that experience.
Sure.
It's just my thought on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that. Any other questions or thoughts on this? So, expectations is kind of another one of those intrinsics, right? So and these are kind of questions that you might ask yourselves as you're thinking about elections, because it's my understanding that right now we have board officer elections. So if at some point you change that to rotating, you still should ask yourselves these questions, Are these your expectations? Do you expect your board president to be fair and support the expression of all positions in the board, even those that are maybe not in the majority? Do we respect that? Are we actively listening to all our board members? Are we leaning into, do they understand the procedures and the policy? Have they read them? Do they understand it? Are they clear with that? A brand new board member might not have had the time to really dig into all of the policies and the operating procedures and may not be the right person at that time to lead that board. And I think that's incredibly important. Communication, do you trust them? Mentoring, future board leadership. We've talked in this group, I think Trustee Macias, you've brought this up. Do we have a good board orientation? What does that look like? A board leader could really lean into that and help bring that to fruition. Can you foster innovation? And of course, we would expect this of all our board members. So it's not just the officers that we're going to ask this of, but once you have to sit in this role, there are additional responsibilities layered on you. And so can you, do you have the capacity to do those at the best of your ability at all times? It is a critical position. Any thoughts about that? Makes sense?
Patricia, I just want to reiterate, we are going to get a copy of all these slides?
Yes, of
Okay,
course.
thank you.
And so I'm kind of coming up to the end of this, and I just wanted to throw a few thoughts out and then take any questions that you might have. And we're going to continue to talk about this in the governance framework because this is also something that will shift as you as a board shift and change your framework and the way that you look at your officers. So this is from Alsby and Gore's book, and it's a really great governance book. And I've shared some of it with you, but I'm happy to share more of it with you. The quality of member relations within the group, it involves trust, cooperation, and mutual respect. Limited closure. So if you close off, leads to individuals. If a board president closes things down, doesn't have that collaboration, doesn't have that active listening skill set, then it leads to individuals acting for their own interests rather than for the good of the entire organization, the good of the entire school district. And that is a pattern that we see all too common in dysfunctional boards. And dysfunctional boards generally lead to poor student outcomes. And so this is just a reminder. This is a great book. Happy to share it with you. The other part of that is this is something that I also think is really critical because this board has definitely been thinking a lot about, how do we make sure we're serving all of our children? All our children have the opportunities they need. That kind of power dynamic shows up in a boardroom as well. So how do you flatten that a little bit? How do you take some of the hierarchy out of it so that you use that position of power, that positional power as an officer to make things better, right? Not to use it as being above the rest of the board, but using it to authentically empower every board member. And that's a critical process. And not just board members, but your superintendent, your community. How do you create an inclusive decision-making process? And I think that's something that the officers can really lean into. And of course, all board members, but that. And, this is just a little note from Leadership and Self-Deception. Treat people as people worth investing versus objects to be moved. And to me, a board president truly understands that, right? That every board member is worth listening to, every community member, we can invest in each other, and we will go so much further. And so, any questions? Any thoughts? Any additional information you would like me to send you around officers? Did I hit everything?
I want to see us add back the position of assistant secretary. We had it, and I don't know why they got rid of it, but.
And so I think we can, in maybe our next session, discuss that. But I would urge you to think about to what end. What do you feel like isn't being served with the current officers that you would want to add officers? Generally, something this happens is if you get too many officers, then you've diluted kind of the directional directional momentum of the board that you're trying to include.
Okay.
So just to think about what you're trying to solve in that scenario, and I think it's definitely warrants dialogue and discussion.
Sounds fair.
Yeah, just for you to know, the only reason that position has been eliminated on the board is because Mr. Sellier refused to accept that position 1 year when he was appointed to the assistant. He said, I don't want the position. So we didn't fill it. It wasn't like we all of a sudden thought, oh no, we don't need it, it doesn't work with the dynamics. It was simply just somebody didn't want it. And so we've not added it. We could not.
But it didn't go away though, right?
It technically
wasn't
filled, and we just have not filled it since then, which again is a reasonable question, do we need it? Mm-hmm. But that's what happened.
Right. I don't think it's listed in your policy.
It should be under our local policy as a position. I don't think we eliminated it, but again, I'm not 100%
I'll
sure.
double check, but I don't think, it could be that I just missed it, so. But it would have to be added back into policy if you're gonna have.
If it had been eliminated, of course.
Yeah. So, any other questions? Any thoughts? I hope that as you, I think that sometimes board members can forget to think about all of these things when officer elections come up, and they are critical positions at the time. And at the time of the district, and they address the needs that are current and prominent and critical. So putting some thought into it, if you're going to want to sit in that seat, that there are added responsibilities, that you have to have the capacity to lead at that level. And then also being incredibly grateful to each board member who does step up into that spot, and being gracious and understanding that there are some added responsibilities. And that's it. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to add that, and I'm speaking to the entire board, this document was amended in, help me out, Betty, what month?
June.
Okay, of last year. What we did not do is we did not accept it. We did not vote and approve it. So if we're going to make any changes, then it will need to go back on the board agenda so that we can discuss it again. And then officially, we need to approve the board operating procedures. I just wanted to say that.
And just also, the board operating procedures do need to include your new governance framework as well. So we would have to.
So we
add that.
definitely
So you
will
will
have to
definitely
amend.
revisit it.
Yes.
And think about it, so.
Well, if there's nothing else, thank you very
Yes,
much,
thank you.
Patricia.
Thank you, all good things to think about.
Yeah, very good. And we will move on to item B, discuss and review information on the proposed fiscal year budget for 2022-23. Dr. Ball? Yes. And the compensation plan.
As we transition, Ms. Pichelle, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to transition out of the meeting. I have to attend another meeting that starts at 6 o'clock, but I'm committed to watching the recording as soon as it's posted and staying abreast of any changes.
Okay, thank you, Ms.
Thank
Rodriguez.
you.
It was good to see you. So let's, for the record, Ms. Rodriguez is leaving the meeting now
At 5:52.
at 5:52. Thank you.
All the budget that we, for reference, I'll read the reference on the web.
We don't have a closed session though, so.
Is it Meredith Montford? Is it Meredith Montford? How may have his motives?
Sure. Yes.
Cool. How are you doing? Thank you. Try to keep it comfortable. Hello.
Oh, for tomorrow?
Yes.
Thank you, Patricia. that's open, if somebody wants to sit there.
Yes, Ms. Ray.
Can we slide a little bit this way?
Betty, I didn't get one.
Just took a
No,
old chair.
that's my old one.
Oh, okay.
My one. Thanks. No, I brought that to compare if I needed to.
So we'll get started. Everybody's okay with that?
Yes, I just want to record the time, it's 5:55.
So we're still with the same meeting, we never adjourned it unless there's Thank you, sorry. So we will continue. This is a continuation of a workshop that we had last week. We want to continue to provide the board additional information. Again, want to thank Mr. Atkins and Scott because I know they worked all weekend to get some numbers for us and some projections. This is the opportunity to truly have a dialogue with the board and for the board to ask us questions, give us suggestions, recommendations, and continue the process of looking at things. Everybody should have a handout, just double checking. I think everybody does. Yes? Yes? Okay. Then, Mr. Atkins, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Madam President, Board, Dr. Ball. This is our fourth budget workshop, and so we have some updated revenue estimates for you. We have an updated tax rate to look at. We have updated payroll budgets to look at. And then budgets have gone out to the campuses and departments. They're due back on the 19th. So we'll start looking at those. And then we'll be finalizing those budgets this month. So in June, we have to finalize the budget. We currently have it scheduled for June 22nd to do the budget hearing and approve the budget that night. In order to do that, we have a publication requirement that says I have to publish in the paper at least 10 days before the hearing, but not more than 30 days from the hearing. So the publication date would be the 13th, and we have to have that publication to the paper by the 9th. So really, the night of the 8th, we have to kind of finalize things. Okay. So just kind of recapping what we looked at last budget workshop, we were asked to come back with some additional compensation plans and some additional information. We heard teacher and bus driver pay were important because those are hard to fill positions. We looked at incentives and the flexibility that the incentives gives our finances, and we have some more information on that tonight. And then we were asked to look at some of the positions that we contract out and how does that look versus hiring employees to do that. And so one of the examples, probably one of the bigger areas besides SPED that we contract out is some of our grounds crew work. And so we worked with maintenance. We have an annual cost for contracting at the bottom there. You can see it's $450,000. And to add one crew, it cost about $600,000. So really the contracting out in that category saves us some money. We also talked about vacant positions, and so we went in and we looked at all the vacant positions we have. And the majority of them are going to be bus drivers, aides, and teachers. And you can look through the list there. We have 177 vacancies currently. Now, this is just in the general fund. We have some additional ones that aren't in the general fund. They might be in title, they might be in child nutrition, something like that. The impact is that's about $7.8 million worth of salaries. And then when you add the benefits in, that comes to about $9.4 million.
If we could take a little pause right there, because I know that last week, we had a lot of discussion about this, and I don't want to pretend like I completely understood, but I think that one of the things that was discussed was the possibility of building the budget without these positions. And these positions are positions that are needed by the district. Even though we've done without them, these are things that, we've talked about in regards how we need these positions. Everything from custodians, hall monitors, secretaries, receptionists, teachers at all, levels. So all of these things, all of these positions are positions that I would consider urgent and truly needed. But I wanted to take a little break, not a break, but a little pause for discussion and say, well, Dr. Ball, look at this position. Maybe you could do without, if you feel as board members that that would be warranted.
Am I right, Dr. Ball, that I think some of the discussion last week was that if people came along, we could fill the positions, but we can't post and hire unless these are in the budget. Isn't that correct?
Right. So if we were to build the budget without these positions and eliminate these 177 positions, I would then, every time we filled one of these positions, then come to the board and say, here's an additional position. We know by our staffing numbers, though, that these positions are needed. So I just, again, want to give the opportunity for the board to ask me any questions. It's not that there has to be, but don't want to assume anything.
We did go through the list and remove positions that were no longer needed, had been in there for, we don't know why. Like they had a superintendent secretary in there. So we don't know why that was in there, but we removed that.
Okay.
And so we did, and we sat with HR and said, are people actively trying to fill these? Yes, these are positions that are actively trying to be filled at campuses and departments.
That was the point in terms of identifying what those positions that chronically sit on our payroll. And so, just for the record, I don't agree with, freezing any of these positions, but the true sense was to identify first what's been sitting out there. I would be kind of curious what that number looked like, because that to me is of interest. Do we have a number?
It was around 10. It was not a large. And like I said, they were just
10
really
positions?
strange. Yes, sir.
So various ranges, so it could be a few 100,000 or so?
Right. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, good. Well, at least we've been able to eliminate and identify some positions we won't need. But the other point was to identify where we're contracting services. And so are we going to address that
Yes.
later in this?
Yeah, really the only two places we contract right now are in SPED for our testing, speech, and in maintenance for, we contract out about 2/3 of our grounds crew. We have a grounds crew that is there in case we need to do something quickly. And we do some contracting on our HVAC just because you can't get the people, you can't get them hired.
And in the same vein of identifying these positions that we didn't need, the question was, have we looked at what we're going to do in those contracted roles? It looks like if SPED is one area, we've talked about the LSSPs being continuously contracted.
Right.
I bet you 10 years worth in terms of we've not been able to fill those positions, but I get the feeling that we've carried, I'm going to throw a number, 30 positions in the LSSP arena, but we fill 16 or so.
I think there's 3.
So there's only 3 LSSP positions?
Yes, sir.
2.
Right in the middle.
The licensed specialist school.
Yeah, the LSSP there, I think it says 3.
So there's only 3 that total, or 3 that we don't fill every year?
3 that are actively we were trying to fill.
Okay, so there's 3 that are, all right.
I do not know how many we have on staff offhand.
But we
we
do
have
contract
some.
in this area.
Yes, sir.
And so are we contracting 3 people, or how many people do we have on contract?
It varies. We're with an agency, and they just kind of rotate.
So that's the question. I don't know if we'll be able to answer that now, but looking at that, what I'm trying to avoid is having this in the budget under an open position that we're trying to fill, as well as in contract. To me, it feels like we put it in two buckets rather than just one. And that's where we started talking, Ms. Canoy and I, all last week about that. I'm just trying to build a more accurate budget instead of putting those positions in there. Because I think the LSSPs commanded $80,000 a pop. I think that was what we talked on average. So 3 positions, $240,000. But I also wanted this information to see really what it looks like. So
we can continue, and then it might answer some more questions.
well, in terms of holding the budget up, this wouldn't necessarily hold that up. I think I'm satisfied with this portion of it. But it does also speak to the idea that I'd like to know every year what we're putting back in the fund balance in unfilled positions. Because if we're not going to remove them, if there is a call to have these because we need them filled, then pretty much every year we should know what we're always putting back into the fund balance. So do we have an idea of what that might look like over the last 2 or 3 years?
So every year, let me just talk about last
The
year.
mic.
Last year, we did
Give her
put
the
money
mic.
back into the fund balance. Oh, sorry. Last year, we did put money back into the fund balance, and my memory's not that good, but I thought it was in the range of $10 million.
22.
22.
We put 22 back in the fund balance for
Right.
positions that were not filled.
It varied, not just for positions that were not filled, but expenditures that we didn't have because it was a very different type of year. So I guess my point, and the way I see it, and help me if to see it differently, is being proactive because we want to hire LSSPs, but at the same time, if we're not able to, we don't get the applicant pool or something happens, then we know we have to have a backup plan because those kids have to be tested, have to be served. But if we don't fill these positions, it goes back into our fund balance. So I see it more as a way of being proactive and making sure that our kids get what they need, because ultimately it goes back and feeds it back into the fund balance.
Even if I were to look at this $9.4 million impact that you're saying on these 177 positions, our goal is to fill them. But as we referenced last week, the call to reach 90 bus drivers and then go to 105 is 15 positions. Does each bus driver on average make $30,000?
Probably with benefits, yes, sir.
So those 15 positions represent $450,000 to the budget, which is a lot of money. But I want to make sure that we're not padding our budget if we're not going to really fill those positions. So in the vein of making life easier, if we just have a knowledge that about $9 million is going to come back every year because we don't fill them, and if we do, then this is good. It's a good thing. We can pretty much then have an idea that when we're seeing a $22 million deficit budget, we know $9 million is probably going to come back, just because historically that's what's come back.
I don't want to say, Bill would know better than I would. I don't want to say historically, because I don't think that historically we've had these issues with filling individuals. But I do want to comment that just last Friday, Bill and I met with transportation, and they shared with us how some people had to do triple, maybe even quadruple the routes. So having not want to say guesstimating, but trying to move toward 105, it is truly something that I hear from the staff is truly needed because they're having to run all those additional routes.
Well, I think obviously as we work through it, and if we have a strong incentive to bring them in and retention, because what I'm worried about is we'll lose our talent, the current talent that's here, and that's not going to help us trying to get to 105 if we're not able to retain the 77 we have now.
Right.
So, but it is a very complex problem. I do feel better that you brought this. Thank you, Dr. Ball. Thank you, Bill. But it gives me a sense of what we're looking at. I would ultimately, just academics, like to know what that number is every year that we're putting back that's not being spent, so that we can see if this $9 million is truly an anomaly, or if there's some rhyme or reason that we're seeing every year $5 million go back, or 7 or 9.
I do believe that every year we have put something back.
We have.
But we could get you those exact figures on what we've put back.
And I go home, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree, we're this debt that we're in, a negative budget, it's nice to know that we have wiggle room and we're not as negative, but clearly we have some objectives to make.
Right. I the long range or the long-term debt is the part that's scary. You know, going in there 1 year, our budget can sustain it. But I don't want to be sitting here in 3 years and saying, oh, by the way, now, board, we might have to really look at doing a RIF because we've gone in 20 million every year.
Yes.
So it's the long-term part that.
Yeah, and that worries me too. It keeps me up at night, so to speak. And but in terms of this year and we could start having really open budget discussions earlier, which is a good thing. But just to address the inquiry, this is fine. I understand it and I appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll continue. Ms.
And I would say pre-COVID, this time of year, we might have 40 vacancies. But for the last 2 years, it's been over 100. So now we're going to talk about the appraisal values. They were adjusted. You know, the election that was held on, was it the 6th? Approved the additional homestead exemption. And so that takes about $600 million additional dollars off of our value. So last time we were here, we were looking at a much smaller M&O Tier 1 tax rate. I think it was about 0.77 or something. The second part of that Tier 1 rule is that all the Tier 1 tax rates have to be within 10 cents of each other. So there's a limitation placed on that. And so the limitation that we would be at is 0.8046. So that part of it went up a little bit. The Tier 2 stays at 5 cents unless we're interested in doing a tax ratification election. And then proposed INS of 0.3654, so a total tax rate of 1.22, which is a drop of 5 cents from this year's tax rate.
Bill, didn't mean to interrupt, but does anybody want Bill to further discuss that, the TRE?
I have a slide on it.
Okay, great. Maybe they don't want that, but maybe they do.
You know, a bond got voted down. I don't have a lot of confidence that that would be approved by the voters at this point.
And the reason I really wanted it to be mentioned is because some of our individuals
Right.
really compare it to a neighboring district.
Yeah.
And that neighboring district did pass the TRE, and that's why they're able to do something quite different.
So again, our ADA, we're using the same that we had last time. You can see our freeze taxable value is down to $12.65 billion. 98 cents, you can see the tax rates, and then we have some updated salary cost options later.
Dr. Ball and Bill,
Yes.
we're talking about the sustainability of our district. At some point, if it gets dire and the need is, we're able to quantify our need, we could look at an increase in the tax rate, right? That would be something that would be not optimal, but again, if we have to conduct business and we can't do it at our current value. But tell me, just for my own understanding, what that would look like if we had to come, would it be a budget cycle like this and we realize we're really far and then we have to put it out for November?
For the TRE, is that what we're
Yeah,
doing?
yeah, if we had to do any of that, just for academics. Again, I know we're not
And
going
I
to do
think
that.
that Bill said he was going to mention
You are
that
gonna
in
mention
another
it?
Yes,
slide.
I have a slide.
Okay. And the other question I had about your estimated tax collections, it's always 98%, but I want to know what the actual, because it's every year it's estimated. What is our actual?
Around 99, 98, 99.
What does that
percent.
1% usually represent if we get to 99? It's a pretty sizable amount, right?
It's probably $1 million. I mean, on the M&O side, it's probably about $1 million. On both sides, it's probably 1.3, 1.4.
Okay. And it's been pretty consistent with our 99% tax collection?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the taxable value, it went from 14 to 12 billion?
Correct.
Okay.
It was adjustable.
All right. Thank you.
Yes. One of the other items that we wanted to look at was some of our title budgets, some of our grant budgets, right? So, and we don't have detail on them because really until we come up with some compensation, it's hard for me to finish those budgets.
Bill, I don't want to forget to mention a part, and it's a question slash statement. If my memory is correct, every year for 4 years now, or at least 3 for sure, our tax rate has gone down for Judson ISD. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, that is
So I
correct.
think that's something to be proud of, and I know that we always talk about whoever's listening or hearing, that maybe our community would like to know that.
So our largest title fund is Title I, and you can see it's 6.5 million. And then we have some Title 1C, which is migrant funds, about 21,000. And we use the migrant co-op at Region 20 to provide those services to our students. Title 2A, which is teacher and principal development funds. So these are a lot of staff development funds, has about 867,000. Title III is our bilingual funds, and they support the various bilingual programs, 258,000. Title IV is a mixture of technology slash, Jody, tell me what it is. Yes. And it's about 415,000.
Technology and safety.
Yes, ma'am.
Safety.
And then we have Perkins, which is the Carl Perkins, that's our CTE federal funds, about 253,000. IDEA is our special education title funds, and they are 4.7 million. And then we get a separate allotment that has to be spent on early childhood, and that's the 90,000. Now, that's about 13.1 million, and we don't have those dollars. All of these programs are reimbursements. So this is another area where we use fund balance throughout the year to go ahead and provide the services, pay salaries, do all that stuff, and then we submit reimbursements on a monthly basis. So I know people think it's sitting in the bank, but it is not. It's sitting in the bank of the U.S. government. So.
And the percentage of these title dollars, programmatic versus personnel, I suspect it's 80% personnel?
At least. A lot of personnel in these dollars, especially Title I. Title II, probably not so much, although we do pay substitutes out of there so that teachers can go to training. It's payroll, but it may not be regular payroll. It may be extra duty, some of those kind of things. Title III, a little bit of it, probably a lot of supplies out of that one. Title IV has salary in it. Again, probably some supplies in that. Perkins is a lot of salaries. IDEA is a lot of salaries. So yes, a lot of salaries.
I know in the past I've had a tendency to just kind of gloss over title dollars, but who besides Dr. Ball being our employee, but who else oversees title?
Jody Burton.
Jody.
Over here.
Okay, great.
Jody Burton and, go ahead.
No, I just waited. Okay.
And she also does have somebody that assists her, so she oversees that along with the ESSER and the documentation that goes along with all that's needed for those dollars.
And only because we're talking about it, I have to just, give perspective on this. Title money is real money, right? We're getting reimbursed for it. It's real. And there was a year on this board where there was a summer program for title. It was programmatic. And we would give kids books filled with backpacks. We send them home. And I questioned that program because no one was analyzing on the back end. Did they ever read the books? And we're spending almost $300,000, I believe, on that program. I say that because we have a lens on what the ROI is for every dollar we're spending here, I would imagine, right? Just so that we don't come across something that we're just spending money for the sake of because we had to spend the money.
Jody oversees the campus, the campus and the district doing needs assessments for those positions and making sure that they're really giving us the bang for the buck.
Okay. Yeah, that was disappointing back then, but I know that we were looking at that.
I think that must have been a while back because I don't remember. Jody, do you remember when that was?
Probably closer to the 7-year mark.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a while back.
Right.
And maybe that's why it was discontinued. I don't know. I can't speak, but maybe. Maybe there wasn't a good return on the investment.
Not at the time, you're right. It was upsetting, you're right. There was not a good return. But we just have a lot of personnel here. Just, I guess, for the sake of future document, can I get an idea of what those positions look like?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So in Title I, when we start the year, we use a planning amount. We just got an updated planning amount. We have what we call reservations that we take off the top. There's some requirements. We try and send at least 70% of those funds to the campuses to be used for tutoring,
Family engagement nights.
family engagements.
All those kinds of things.
Yeah. And so we start with that and we kind of watch the top. And then we have indirect costs. Those are monies that the district can collect to pay for overhead services, like it's to reimburse us for like utilities or accounting or payroll, those kind of costs. We have a mandatory parental parent involvement requirement of 1% has to be spent on parent involvement. So you can see that there in the middle of the page. Any type of engagement they do with the student, with the parents, where there is instructional things presented, math nights.
Family literacy nights.
Family literacy nights, yes.
Also tap into socially emotional,
Yes.
dealing with cyberbullying. And so it depends upon what is specific needed. But yes, a lot of times you'll see where they're focusing on for helping the parents then bring that information at home so they can support their students.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Bill.
Yes. Then we have what we call mandatory P&P, which is private schools. These are the only dollars. The dollars don't really follow the student. The services follow the student. And Jody negotiates with 2 or 3 schools.
We have 4 with
4.
our 7, but then also throughout Perry County, and we partner with Region Planning.
Right. And so if there's a student that is eligible for Title I services at one of these private schools, she negotiates, do they need an iPad to do their deal? Do they need tutoring? Do they do that? And we pay for those services, but they're provided at the school. And then we have some district staffing that comes out of Title I, and so we reserve that. We have some staff development dollars that we keep there, and then summer school. We pay for a part of summer school out of
I
there.
think there might be a question. It's okay, let's ask, because I might have to.
Oh, you said we pay for a student that goes to one of these private schools?
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
We pay for that?
Right, they are a student that lives in Judson ISD, but this is the only program in the title deal where we have to provide services to them if the school wants to. The school is voluntary whether they want to or not. And I think we have, that's the
What the
rule.
federal government says.
It's the rule of the program, the federal rule.
Oh, we managing this?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh.
Yes, ma'am.
No, I like it, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of work, ask Jody. So, out of the 6.5 million, we will send 4.6 to the campuses. And then they get their allotment. The first thing they have to do is cover their staffing, and then after that, they can utilize those dollars to, like I said, do tutoring, do all kinds of stuff, buy supplies, anything like that. So, kind of how Title I works. Title I, the amount is determined by the census. So it's important that our census data is correct. But the distribution in Title I is pretty strict, and it's done by economically disadvantaged students. And so what the rules say is we can split up our schools by what they call grade span. So we can have elementary and middle school and high school. And the rule says that the most economically disadvantaged campus has to get at least $1 more per student than the ones that are below it. So if you go over to the 6th column on that first part of the deal, you can see we have them ranked from the highest to the lowest, and you can see that the allotments, per pupil allotments, go down as they go down in economically disadvantaged students. And that's by design. A campus has to be at least 40% economically disadvantaged to be served, but if they're over 75, they have to be served. And I'll show you where we have one of those in a little bit. We service 3 of our middle schools, and that's because they're over the 80%, over the 75%, and we don't service the other 2. When you look at our high schools, and you look at Wagner, it's over 75%. But you see that there's no dollars there. The reason that is because if we were to serve Wagner out of Title I, it would just about wipe out the elementary budgets. So what the law says is we can skip it in Title I, but we have to serve it with what it would have gotten in Title I out of another source. And so we do that, and I'll show you through SCE. So they get additional SCE dollars because SCE ranking is a little more flexible.
So, what is SCE?
Our state compensatory education dollars.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So the next slide is our SCE budget, and it increased greatly under House Bill 3. It used to be determined, the amount was determined based upon our free and reduced economically disadvantaged. Now again, it is being done by the census, by census blocks. And so there's 5 different categories, and you get different weighted funding depending on how economically disadvantaged your census block is. And so our SCE, Jody, did it double almost under House Bill 3? Yes. So we get about $24.7 million in state comp. Again, here we have a spending requirement. The state says we have to spend 55% of that on SCE services. And the reason they allow you to have the other 45 is because we wouldn't have enough funds to give general fund raises if we didn't. And so that number has changed. When I first started, it was 85% that you had to spend. And then it dropped down to 52, and now it's at 55. And so because so many dollars flow through it, we use those dollars to pay general fund teachers. So we have some district social workers that we staff out of there and their materials and supplies. We have staff development that comes out of there. We pay part of Imagine Learning, but that's going to change this year to a different program. So, MAPS, yes ma'am. We used to have a daycare program at Wagner, but it only had like 2 kids, so we closed it a couple years ago. We do RTI out of there. We have money, what we call a district initiative, and it's budgeted in there because we never know what's going to come up, right? A lot of times this gets rolled into summer school because our summer school program is so big. I think about $3 million this year. Yes. So we have Ayers House, which is a juvenile justice house that we provide staff for. We pay part of Edgenuity out there because that's our credit recovery. We have communities and schools coming out of there, and then summer school. And so we take about $3.3 million off the top, and the rest, we also pay J-Care is pretty much 100% paid out of there, as well as JLA. And so we'll send about $8.7 million to the campuses. And like I said, its ranking is a little more flexible, but we try and do very similar ranking to Title I. And so again, you can see the columns on the left-hand side, and every once in a while, you'll see an anomaly. So if you go down to Wortham Oaks, you can see that their allotment's bigger than the one above it. But that's just so they can cover their staff. They get very little other dollars. We also tend to have larger allotments in our secondaries because they don't get Title I dollars, most of them. And so when you look down to Wagner, you can see that we added their allotment in SCE would have been about 900,000, but we had to add an additional 400,000 that they would have received in Title I. So they get additional dollars. And any questions on that? Okay. IDEA is our third largest program, and it has an allocation of about 4.5 million typically. They got some bonus money through ARA this year. So we did make some purchases with that. We purchased the buses that they're going to be using for some of their life skills classes. And this program has something that's called maintenance of effort. And what it is we have to make sure that we spend the same amount or more state and local dollars, either in total or per pupil, than we did the previous year before. And so that's something we keep up with almost on a monthly basis, making sure. Because if we don't maintain that, then they would cut us by the amount we didn't reach that the following year. They would cut our IDEA allotment. So if we were $100,000 short of maintenance of effort, our allotment would probably get cut $100,000 the next year. And so we don't want to do that. So we watch that. You can see the adopted budget, and then you can see where money was added from the bonuses. And you can kind of see 61XX is personnel. So you can kind of see a breakdown here. 62XX is contracted services. 63 is material and supplies. 64 is travel and miscellaneous. And 66 is a capital expense. And then we also brought you some updated ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 budgets and kind of where they're sitting. And again, ESSER 2 should be expended by September of 2024. And ESSER 3 would be September of 2025. Now, with the Tidings Amendment, they actually give us an additional year, but it's better if you try and spend the dollars.
Dr. Bill, at the last meeting, I did mention about the technology acquisitions from our ESSER budget.
Yes,
and,
sir.
So I know we've acquired some. It looks like in ESSER 2, we've, 4 million is our budget, 4.228, but we've spent already 2.1. Am I reading that correctly?
If you start about halfway down at the 2.2 million, 2.29 for the 7,000 Chromebooks.
Yes.
Everything past there, except the last one, staff retention, is technology.
Yes, correct. And one I'm looking at is the one that's in progress. The other ones say complete, so they're done. But,
correct.
But the amount that's not done is the in progress one, the laptops, flat screens, and so forth for the next 3 years.
Yes, sir.
The reason I brought it up was because I wanted to look at that being where we might pull resources to put teacher aides in classrooms, because the cost was pretty high. And so I wanted some rationale to this, and either you or Dr. Ball can give me that. But when I'm looking at physically being in front of students, the teacher aides still have a greater value in the short run than technology. So tell me a little bit what this technology will do to ensure that our kids get to grade level.
Sure. So I'll share a little bit, and then I know that Ms. Gosh has a lot that she'll want to share. But I want to remind a couple of things. First of all, is in regards to the huge expenditure in regards to technology is because Judson has been so far behind. When I first entered the district, our own teachers didn't have laptops that they could use. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but our teachers didn't have laptops. We had a lot of classrooms that didn't have technology. One of the biggest things that we're working on right now is truly making the instruction engaging for our students and providing things that will engage our students in hands-on type of experiments and working with things that will allow the critical thinking for our students. And that no longer is a workbook or a sheet of paper, but using those devices that we need in order to be able to provide a modern day experience for our students. And those things really lack in our district. Anything from whiteboards to, Promethean boards, whatever you want to call them, but devices that will engage our students is also critical for our teachers to have in the classroom to be able to close that achievement gap. But I know, Lacey, you could share a lot more details about it.
Specifically, I can just add to what Dr. Ball was stating there, but specifically these funds are to create the interactive learning environments at some of our campuses so that we can have some of the maker spaces that the campuses are asking for within their libraries and within their shared learning spaces for students. We also have a great deal, as Dr. Ball said, technologies that are simply out of date, technologies that no longer work, that need to be replaced. So these funds are to help with the replacement of that so that our teachers and our staff on the campuses have the tools and materials that they need in order to instruct our children and work with our children. And so these are really funds to create. I know we're working right now to try to create some of the model classrooms as to what our classrooms look like for the future. And that includes things that some of these dollars are even included for areas that teachers are asking for, such as flexible seating in the classroom that lends itself to that interactive and collective. So within these funds, we are looking at how do we transform that classroom into a modern day classroom with the flexible seating, with the flat interactive panels that allow students and teachers to screencast together and to create those learning spaces. So very much like you have heard through the innovation grants that we are doing at Park Village as well as at Metzger Middle School, we are utilizing these funds to recreate that type of environment at all of our other campuses to help create that equity across our systems so that our students are provided with those equal opportunities to learn in those different ways.
You might want to speak, just to give one concrete example. Just this week, last week, we were at ELA. And talk about some of those things that our students will be able to experience that, as the board has charged me with, is making this a premier school district where parents want to pick Judson ISD. So we need to set ourselves apart from other districts. So if you could just briefly share with the board some of those things.
I think instructionally, to add on to that, I know one of the philosophies that we've really talked about within our department in terms of the use of technology instructionally for our kids is that we don't want to replicate necessarily what somebody else is doing elsewhere, but we want to kind of set the standard for what instruction looks like for students across the state is what we would like to do with that. And so last week we were at ELOF, and when in meeting with the principal and the teachers there, one of the areas that they were really concerned with is not having a makerspace type location on the campus that was fully worked out to support all of the STEAM activities, to support the art, to support the engineering, to support the robotics. And so we actually brought out a group to come and do a demonstration with the teachers in terms of what those makerspaces can look like. And one of the things that they demonstrated was something called Mission to Mars, was one of the ones that they were looking at. And you know, our students at ELOF are getting ready to go to NASA. And so we're looking at creating within the library, so we have 2 locations selected on the campus, one which would be a combined makerspace that would be utilized for all classrooms, that would support art activities for English language arts and reading and writing, as well as the mathematics for the science. So we would bring in robotics components, we would bring in mathematical components in geography and architecture, and we're building out that space that can be shared. It's actually large enough you could have 2 classes, but at the same time, we also want to convert a portion of the library to be one of those locations that you can really, as you go into the library, you can see the 3D printers, you can see the activities that the students are doing in an ongoing learning environment, more in a robotics type setting, to help build that engineering piece that you can feed from ELOF into our JSTEM project, into our T-STEM project. So this is kind of the beginning portions of that. And the teachers came out, they interacted with it, they were very excited about it. We're in the process now of trying to work out what is going to be best to meet with the curriculum and the needs of that campus to really build out ELOF as a true STEAM academy. And not just in name, but in offering those students something along those lines that is different to match with the purpose behind and the innovation behind the academy.
I don't know if that was probably way more than y'all wanted, so I apologize for getting off topic, but I think that's important information for the board to hear, that we're making some advancements in the area of technology that I don't think we want to take a step back. So sorry, Bill. Go.
No, you probably think the same thing, man. I hear too much, way more than I need to hear from Mr. Macias, so I totally respect you coming back with the information. I get that. My concern, though, would be that a lot of what you described is a future bond, infrastructure improvement, technology, that we would put on a proposition that would say, we need this for our district. If we put on the bond, let's rebuild ELOF, that would be something I think voters would say, we want to see this. But when we have ESSER funds, the primary course is to put students first, which we all do, and put them on grade level quicker. So I see this effort being a future bond and not an immediate in the classroom. We talk a lot about what parents are concerned about. They're concerned about safety. They're concerned about not having enough individualized attention with their students. Teacher aides would address that. Plus, it would also address what teachers are telling me now. There's too many students in the class, they can't get to them. So fundamentally, in elementary, this is where we would want the teacher aides, because you still need to learn how to read and write and do your math. Teacher aides, I think, could play an invaluable role in getting that done. Now, I say that, and I'll be devil's advocate for my own content, is that we might not find teacher aides. But the thing is, I feel that has a more immediate impact, because I'll go back to an agenda item that we had not too long ago, where we put those big screen interactive, and I asked, is there a way to measure what student success will look like from there? And there was not a response to say, okay, every television or big screen, we're going to see an improvement of 5% on grade level attainment. We need to be focused on that, because ESSER funds are designed for that. And so I'm willing to say, listen, okay, what type of laptops do our teachers need to be better? But we don't have to spend $2 million on that. We can clearly spend some of that to teacher aides. That's what I'm trying to put on the table to I guess, see where I'm coming from.
Right. And we could debate this, a lot. I think that my recommendation to the board would be to hire as many teachers to get those numbers lower and not do the teacher aides. That would be just my 2 cents. I think that, the teachers is what's critical. And believe me, our teacher aides are wonderful individuals. They are hardworking, great people. But I think that most parents would want a lower class size number. That should be our first goal. And if we can't get that, then the teacher aides.
Well, and that's dual, because I also want teachers in the classroom. That is priority. But every initiative has multiple strategies. Definitely. And I still get back to laptops, flat screens, and technology, wanting to know what quantifies grade level attainment. And Without that, I'm not as confident that teacher aid still wouldn't be a better solution right now. Because again, we may even have trouble filling teacher slots. So it's nice to have all the resources, but you need somebody to train and be there with them. And so that, again, I'm willing to compromise, but I'm not saying I don't want those things, but in the next 2 or 3 years, we could clearly have this as a bond initiative, because we'll put another bond out there that will say we need this technology. And that is something clearly we could pay for. I don't think, and I'm just asking this if somebody knows, I don't think we can put in a bond that we want to buy more teacher aides with a bond, right? No, we can't. So ESSER funds would make sense from an application. The bond and future efforts would make sense on technology.
Right. And you know that I am not trying to give you a hard time, but
I love
this conversation.
Sure.
But my thing is that with the aides, my concern would be when these SR funds run out, then what would I be saying and looking at somebody and saying, I'm sorry, you don't have a job anymore? So that would...
I would say, because the technology runs out too. Before you know it, the technology has a 7-year life cycle and is done, or even less even. So I would say if we see visible improvement, like I said in one of our sessions, parents are not going to get mad at me because we're trying to find money to make their students successful. We'll find the money. I mean, if it comes down to it and we can prove in a 3-year window that we've moved the academic needle, I promise you our community will say, this works. In fact, other districts will probably be looking at us to say, hey, this works. But we're not doing that. And right now, meanwhile, we have teachers that are overstressed, overstaffed, too many kids are in the classroom, and teachers are one part of it, but I still believe teacher aides is another part. So when we get to that part, I'm going to continuously advocate that we put a meaningful amount in teacher aides, especially at schools that are already overcrowded, and looking at 3rd grade, maybe talking about kindergarten, whatever that might be. But I feel we need to do something. And again, I pledge to fight to ensure that we're helping teachers. And I think technology versus teacher aides, the teacher aides win every time, just because I don't see the technology having a direct benefit to grade level attainment. But we'll get there.
I would say that we opened ELOF as a STEAM academy, and parents chose to send their students there because it's a STEAM academy. And we can't tell them, oh, it's not going to be a real STEAM academy until we pass a bond to put these things in place for them. So that's not acceptable to me, to take that money away from the innovative program that we approved at that campus. So I'm a no-go on that. I'm also a no-go on aides, period. I want to put as much money in the pockets of our staff as possible this year, period. That's what they want. That's what they need. And I think lessening the stress of meeting rising inflation, all the expenses that they've encountered, having a little bit of extra dough in their pocket is going to go a long way to making them feel less stressed. And so for me, that's my priority. I honestly don't think you're going to get the return that you think you will from all those aides. And that's from my experience, 23 years teaching in Judson. So that's my priority.
I will say, just in case anybody thinks I was implying that we don't support our teachers, that I also agree with you. So if we got to that point, would we take this $2 million that we have in technology and also apply it to support teachers more? See, because that's not the deal. Because I do want to support teachers. I'm still pushing for a 5% increase for teachers this year. But I also want to make sure that we're using ESSER funds that are for a 3-year window as strategically as we can to move academic performance. That's all I'm saying. And until I see what the technology piece will do, I'm just not sold. Just because I recall the previous conversation of what will this do to improve grade level attainment in the classroom. And if I don't see that, then is that the best expenditure of our dollars right now? So
just be careful that you're not trying to find efficiencies in just the technology, right? Because that's an enrichment tool that needs to be incorporated into a classroom. So,
Speaking to your mic.
So I would just say, let's be cautious, and I agree with you. We need to figure out if things are worth the investment. When we talk about technology, I kind of work in this every day.
Yeah, I was going to say, you see it.
Yeah, I mean, these are enrichment tools intended to be implemented into the classroom to provide a piece of the comprehensive solution. They're not intended to be a zero-sum game. It's not intended to be a replacement, or at least it shouldn't be. That's a conversation that I don't think anybody here disagrees with. So it's a balance. So I think it's not just one or the other. It's determining what we have in place. What should we have in place? Because for far too many years, the district didn't have a true technology initiative. And in 2022, that's, heck, in 2001, that was detrimental to students, period, right? So, let's kind of approach that conversation with a sense of balance. I think one of the fundamental things that we're trying to understand, and that'll remove a lot of this discussion, is how are we, or what are we doing to ensure that we diversify and amplify our teacher recruitment and retention? So if we were to solve that, then I think we don't have the discussion anymore about, we don't necessarily have to have the full-throated discussion about teacher aides, because now we have the primary educator in place. Is that right? Mm-hmm. So I guess that is my question. What is it that we're doing to amplify our recruitment and retention strategies overall as part of the discussion?
And is that a question for right now, and I'm not trying, or?
High-level thought.
Right. I think that some of the things that we have done is we've partnered like with Region 20 to try to get some of our own paraprofessionals certified. I think that's definitely one of them. The second thing would be in regards to the amendment that we made for our District of Innovation. I think that would be the second, thing. And then what we have done, and we started, I think, 2 years ago, is the incentive for the feeder pattern of the most neediest schools receiving that extra financial incentive also to keep some of our best teachers at those campuses. But that is definitely a conversation I want to continue. I just don't want us to deviate too much from the budget, and I think I might have started that by talking this much about technology.
I think everybody here has like the right intention in mind. It's just I personally don't want the pendulum to swing too far one way or the other. Right. Because it is a blended approach to ensure that we have a comprehensive solution in place, that we're not looking at ourselves 3 years from now and saying, yeah, that was the wrong call, and we went all in. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want to just go all in on one thing, right? So that makes just sense. Keep that in mind. However, to Mr. Macias's point, and again, working on this every day, not all technology is built the same. So if we are going to invest in tech, we have to make sure that it is, appropriate, obviously, that staff knows how to leverage it, because it won't make any difference if it's in the classrooms or in the buildings if nobody knows how to leverage it, if it's actually not intended or not being used for its intended purpose. So, just some thoughts there.
And I would say that the idea of teacher retention, Mr. Diaz, is quite relevant here today, because if we're going to look at incentives that recruit teachers and retain them, we have even ESSER funds that we could talk about now, as we should be in these budget discussions. Northside received some information. They're offering signing bonuses. So do we look at signing bonuses as well to kind of counteract that? That's what I think would be a smart usage of then retaining. We might not have an issue. We might find every teacher coming through because they want to get the retention bonus or starting bonus, whatever you call it. But that's what we need to talk about. And I feel that there's room within this ESSER budget to do that.
Right. And I know that Bill has some things on ESSER. So if we could maybe look at some of the new options.
Sure.
That'd be okay.
Okay, on the next page is just, again, the all three of the ESSER programs and the expenditures to date in the various object categories of payroll, contracted services, instructional supplies, and travel.
And Mr. Bill, yes, I think I asked for positions in title. I'd like also the positions on payroll for ESSER, what the positions are.
Yes, sir.
And what that salary looks like.
Yes, sir. So let's talk about TRE. So we currently access 5 of the available Tier 2 17 pennies. Now, I will tell you, you approve 17, but that's not what you get because House Bill 3 compressed Tier 2 as well. So, anyway, we would have to have a TRE election. As of last legislative session, all TRE elections now are required to be on the November general election date. A TRE for us, 1 penny additional tax would bring us about $2.5 million additional dollars.
And can you explain, Bill, what that does to our tax rate? Because I think that's important information for
It
the
would
community.
increase our tax rate, yes, ma'am. So the community would have to vote to increase their tax rate. On the next page are the Bexar County districts that have a TRE and or surrounding districts, and then the ones that do not have a TRE. And of course, the military ISDs don't collect taxes, so. And like I said, COMAL just approved theirs 2 weeks ago in May.
And that was a very close
Very close election.
vote on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So compensation options. The next page is just, again, a reminder of some of the additional benefits that we do. We do have the bus driver incentive that will be paid out this June. If they were employed with us September 1st and stayed through the end of the year, there's a $500 incentive to do that. The other thing is we did give an ESSER incentive in December, and the plan right now is to give one this December and next December.
What are we giving in December again?
We were using ESSER dollars to give an incentive, a retention
And we plan
incentive.
to do that again this December?
Yes, the next 2 Decembers, we've decided to do that.
Very good.
And that's $1,000 for full-time employees, $500 for part-time, and $400 for long-term subs. So option 9 is the option that Mr. Macias asked me to look at. It is a 5% raise for everybody except professionals, which is a 2%. But if the person is making less than $20 an hour, then the raise was increased to 7%. And like I said, it took me a while to do this because I had to go person by person. So the estimated starting teacher pay would be $56,752. A 20-year teacher would be $63,872. Starting minimum pay would be $1,507. And estimated starting driver pay would be $1,683. The potential raise comes with about $11.7 million cost and provides a $22 million deficit. And again, I want to point out that each one of these options has the ESSER incentive at the bottom there. That would be on top. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
Would you please go over those ESSER incentives again? 500 for the bus drivers.
No, 1,000 for all full-time employees,
Okay,
500 for part-time, and 400 for long-term subs.
thank you.
So option 10 is looking at a 5% raise for all employees except professional, and theirs would be 3. And then we have the ESSER incentive in December, and then all auxiliary and clerical employees would get an additional $1,000 in June. The teacher pay is the same because of the 5% raise. Starting minimum pay for auxiliary would be $14.78. Today it's $14.04. And the estimated starting bus driver would be $16.48. That one has a price tag of about $10 million and gives us a $20.2 million deficit. Option 11 is the exact same plan, except instead of a 5%, it's a 6%. And it has a price tag of, well, the minimum starting would change a little bit. Starting teacher would be $57,360, a 20-year would be $64,480. Minimum starting pay for auxiliary would be $14.93, and minimum starting for a bus driver would be $16.62.
67?
67, excuse me. I don't have my cheaters on. Again, estimated deficit of $22 million.
And does that include the auxiliary and clerical additional 1,000?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not 10 and 11 are identical except for
that.
Yes.
They all have the TASB salary adjustments, these plans, 9, 10, and 11?
Not totally all of them, some of them.
What do you mean? Tell me what some means.
Well, like on the very first one, because we did the 7%, it was very difficult to figure out what TASB, where it would even fit.
So who got the salary adjustments then? And the 5?
The teachers.
So it was okay? You could do it with
Yes.
5% with the teachers?
Yes.
I guess I would probably look at a potential amendment to the budget once we agreed on a percentage for employees like transportation and custodial staff to see what that might look like. But you don't have a pie in the sky ballpark what that might look like.
As far as,
If
more time.
If we did adopt option 9,
Okay.
and then we said, okay, since you couldn't really figure out what that would look like, now we want to do the salary adjustment on top of option 9. We would have to pass an amendment later if we decided to do that. I want to get a ballpark of what that would potentially cost. And again, I would say bring it back, because you won't know. Right now, you didn't do it because it
Correct.
was too much. So I'm just trying to figure out if we're looking at an extra $1 million in terms of
But-
salary adjustments.
I think the 7% was probably an adjustment, right? It was an adjustment to the scale.
Yeah, and tell me if this is corrected. The correction I'm trying to rectify is that starting bus driver salaries, or even starting custodial salaries, were higher. And then when we, the 5-year, 10-year employees, the gap was very close. What I'm trying to do is ensure that the adjustment, so we can value the senior transportation and custodial services, pay them what they're worth based on what we started, where we raised the starting salary. And so that's what I'm fundamentally trying to do, because back to the retention. They work hard, they deserve the raise, but they also deserve the salary adjustments. And you said that TASB, if you were able to do that for our teachers, which would have been the next area. I want teachers to also see the salary adjustment. But I'm still looking to rectify that part.
But I guess maybe if I'm not understanding, with the 7% raise, they are seeing a salary adjustment.
They're seeing an increase naturally, yes. But, for example, I don't know the real numbers, but just say $14 is what we moved transportation up to, the starting bus driver, right? Say 14, and these are all, but say a 5-year employee is making $15.06. So now they're making $1.06 more than someone who just started, but they've been here for 5 years. And they're thinking, you know what, we can go anywhere we want to go. Forget this, we're out of here. And if we're talking retention, they're going to get, the starting position now is with the 7%, it's going to be 14 plus, because we've added 7%. We've also added 7% to that $15.06 as well, so they're making more too. But we've never adjusted the salary, there's still a gap.
The scale.
Right, but I guess, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, with doing this 7%, it almost voids those scales that TASB came up with. Because this is more than the scales that TASB came up with.
And then we can take the lead and just adjust that, because at the end of the day, it's still about retaining our experienced transportation and our custodial services.
So just to make sure I understand, so you want us to use our scale, put in the 7% increase, and then still make adjustments?
That has been the expectation. The 7% is more because of what we know has been a very tough time for our lower waged employees, and 7% is our effort, I believe, to help them meet their needs. The salary adjustment is something that should have happened, that we did not rectify when we increased the starting salary. As a board, we should have looked at that then to make sure that we didn't have angry people out there. There was angry people out there saying, "Don't you value my work? I've been here forever." And so we have to do that piece for this to work.
So then my question then is, how do we do this in a way that is fair and consistent? Because I can't do, my recommendation would be not just for transportation, because those salary scales are like that for every single category.
And I asked Bill about the teachers, if the adjustments were made, and he said yes. So right now, it's just back to transportation, custodial, cafeteria, all the employees that are on the lower pay scale.
But when you, and yes, they are adjusted, but a teacher will quickly say, well, the difference between me and the next year is $100. So when's a good number to say?
Well, hold on. The TASB recommendation did the salary adjustment, right?
The adjustments that the TASB recommended was because we were given a 2% raise and they wanted us to pay at least the median or above the median, right? So giving a 5% raise, it probably exceeds that adjustment.
Okay. And so I guess I'll ask a question about teachers then. Do we have where we've increased, and I look at the compensation plan for teachers, there is a big enough gap, at least I think, in it. Back to Mr. Diaz's point about retention. So are we making teachers feel valued by giving them the appropriate salary? Now, I don't understand what TASB did. I mean, I thought they came and they did a salary adjustment. They recommended a 2% raise. That's what I thought they did, which meant every teacher salary or was adjusted. We're deviating, and I love the 5%, but I just thought it would also come with the natural adjustments as well.
And it does.
It does, and that's what I'm hearing. It does, but it didn't happen for the transportation.
No, it does. It does happen, just not at the big enough gap.
Then what would
they
be,
want.
what would be nice for me to see is that information you're working on, tell me where transportation ends up with that 7%. Because you have to do that work anyway to kind of get your figures. Where teacher salaries look like, just so that I can see, because I'm visual, I need to see it.
And I think, and we can do that, but I think what would definitely help is to, out of all of these, to say, you know what, Dr. Ball, this is the one the majority of us like.
Okay,
so
that's fair.
We could really start to hone in on one.
Sure. I think that's fair.
To try to get it, as real numbers as you would like.
But in all fairness, we may not have all the information we need to say which one we like, because you haven't brought us everything. But I can give you my sense. I'm still liking the 7, 5, and 2.
Option 9.
Yeah, I'm still liking it, but they're still incomplete in terms of what more it might cost or what more. But in principle, if I had to just pick one and say we did nothing more, I would pick option 9 right now. But
so let's hear from everybody a little bit, if that's okay.
What I'd like to know is, Mr. Macias, just how many of the bus drivers are you referring to that would need salary adjustments?
I don't know. I don't know what that would look like, but I certainly would hope that whatever adjustments we took the lead on, that we were careful that it would work to retain talent and not have them walk off. Because just like teachers, they can leave too. There are other transportation departments that are hiring, everyone's short. So the goal now is to be strategic. What do we need to do to make this work? And I think in good faith, we should be able then to make those adjustments as we go.
Because I'm thinking that there's probably not very many, if you're talking about bus drivers that have been here for
5 or 10 or 15 years. Yeah, you might
or
be
even
right.
more.
Yeah, or even longer. I don't know. But clearly that would be easier if we did know, and that way we could
And only those would need to be adjusted then.
Possibly.
But I think what I'm maybe not understanding is, I don't think it's so much the number of employees in regards to what is a good amount that the difference would be. And this is what I'm trying to explain. I work 10 years, you've worked 20 years with the transport, using transportation. $1 difference, $2 difference, 75 cents difference. I don't know if we'll ever get to an amount that says this is a good difference.
I would dare say you have a very active transportation department, so you could even ask them what they would want, or even the supervisor. I'm just putting it out there, but you could get some input from them on what you think is fair. Because again, ultimately, we need to bring all 77 back, and we need to build on that. And at this point, we can't even fill it to 90.
And I guess my caution would be is we keep using the word transportation, but I think we also have to be fair and consistent. That we have the same issue with custodians.
Yeah,
child
absolutely.
nutrition,
I agree. But child nutrition, we can use child nutrition funds for that potentially. That could help.
But remember, we've had to supplement child nutrition before. And there's always that possibility. So we have to be aware that that's a true, real possibility.
Sure.
Can I say that we have 0 and 10 and 20-year salaries for both bus drivers and teachers on slides 26, 27, and 28 for the 3 different options.
As long as ultimately, Dr. Ball, Bill, as long as ultimately what we do is we differentiate the value of more veteran employees, and I'll say employees because you're right, it's not only transportation. Veteran employees based on where we put the starting pay. That's the part that I think needs to be stressed. And if we have the ability to lead it ourselves, then we don't have to rely on TASB. We can come with that. And whatever's competitive, because all the other pay scales are out there. So we know more or less what Northside's doing for their pay scale to get a better sense of it.
I don't know if there's other board members that might want to share.
When I look at this in terms of the difference. We are going to go into a deficit anyway. So I'm looking at this as how much of a deficit do I want to commit to being. So I'm looking at option 10.
I'm looking at option 11 because that gives a consistent raise across the different categories, but we've built in then the incentive for our bus drivers already. And then for our auxiliary and clerical, the additional 1,000. So that puts some extra money in their pocket. So I'm looking at option 11. That's the one I'm leaning to.
Yeah, we're starting off.
Well, I like option 11 as well. When I look at the page 28 and the compensation plan there, I like that. But I have a couple of questions. Wait, we want to hear from everybody first, right? Mr. Diaz?
I'm gonna hold off for now.
Oh, okay. Ms. King?
You've got the floor.
No, I'm getting ready to ask something about something totally different.
Well, I'm leaning more towards option 11 as well.
Okay, can we go back to page 6, please?
Is it the vacancies?
Yes, the vacant positions. Now, I understood what Mr. Macias was asking, and it's pretty clear. But on speech language, pathologist there,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, we contract out 23. So I don't understand why it only says that we have 2 vacant.
The different positions.
But I don't mean to interject, I do not think we contract for 23 of them. I think that's how many we have.
They're contracted, though. They're not on our staff.
No, I think we have 23 on our staff.
Right.
And we're trying to hire 2 more. But we still contract sometimes when we can't get to all the services, the testing.
Yeah, we do contract.
Six? Six? Okay, 23 contractors.
So, that's a lot more than two. That means that's a vacant position. That's the point Mr. Macias is have been trying to make. You know, we're contracting out for 23. Why can't we hire them? Because wouldn't that be cheaper than contract?
Sure, and we could get them to come in.
There's a reason they go with the contracting facility. They're either getting better pay or better benefits, or they don't have to work unless they want to. There's a reason why they go with those. And those are probably things that we can't compete with, which is why we have vacant positions.
But we're paying for it, though.
Yeah.
So,
But I don't-
it's like we pay a company to go through them to get them.
Right, but I don't know if we have 23 here every day, all day long. We may have 23 different people. Some of them may choose to work 3 days a week. Some of them may work half days. That's why they go to the contracting world, because they do and can set their own hours pretty much.
And that money comes out of general fund?
It comes out of special ed and IDEA.
It just seems like if we could, and I know this would have to be worked on later, but it just seems, well, it does make sense to me, that if we adjust the pay to make it more attractive, that we can hire people and have them, they work for us instead of us paying a third party to bring them in. We're paying more, aren't we? I'm just asking, I don't know.
Great questions. I mean, those are great. Those are great. And even if we raise the pay, hopefully at least I can keep the ones I have, but there's no guarantee that I'm going to get all of them in.
It's not just pay that they want. They want those other benefits too, and setting their own schedule, working part-time or whatever, that just doesn't really work well for us.
But you're saying that, Ms. Kanoya, and this is where I'm confused. You're saying it doesn't work well for us, but isn't it working well for us? Isn't that what we're doing? I'm confused. Isn't that what
I don't know if
happening?
I can explain it to you. What
I'm a little slow. Okay, seriously.
No, I'm not saying that
No,
at
I
all.
am. I'm saying because
let's say that I'm the SLP.
Okay.
But I don't want to work full time.
Okay.
But the only jobs that are available in a school district are full-time jobs, because that's how we're set up. That's how we do.
But do we have to be set up that way?
It becomes very complicated when you look at benefits, because if they're part-time, they don't get benefits, or do they? And then about scheduling, how do we make sure that we have the right number of people at each campus that we need to cover the schedules? Big companies that only specialize in contracting SLPs have a lot more freedom in how they work that way than we do as a school district. We probably don't have enough people to figure all that out. We'd have to add staff to in accounting and personnel to deal with that. Am I right?
I'm just trying to do what we all here
Absolutely,
trying to do.
those are great questions.
Understand the money, but to me that should be being on the list of vacant positions. Should be 25 instead of 2, because that's misleading.
Well, it's
they,
two that maybe
the
contractors can't fill.
Yeah, but so then
So we're still looking for full-time
we have
people.
25.
And we'd much rather have them on our staff.
Right.
Because then they're part of, Judson, which is a great place to be.
Yes, we'd love to, and maybe if we could offer them some more flexibility, we could get them to want to come and join our family.
So I'd love to hear from the board, what would you like for us to go back and do? Unless I'm the only one that needs that, you got it, Bill, but I would love some.
I still need the information about contracted services, because that is to a point to Ms. Eaton. I haven't seen what our contracted services dollars are going to. And again, with the idea that we don't have duplicate costs in payroll and in contracted services. And so if we have 23 LSSPs on contract, the question is, what is our strategy? No?
You're saying, you're using the wrong term.
What I need to mean?
23 contracted
Speech.
SLP.
Okay. So that's sort of what I want to understand, because it does look like we have to adopt the contract strategy. That works, which means we can dump it from payroll. Nobody wants to, I mean, nobody can't fill these positions. We carry them all year. That was the idea and intent of doing that.
But the way I see it is, it's not in payroll, because then if not, the 23 would have been.
Sure.
Right?
Sure, yeah, but 3 of them are, according to this, and are those 3 all, are we filling them, or are they riding the whole year? That, again, it's a small amount. I'm not going to worry about this part, but that's the question I asked last month, trying to figure out what that cost looks like. So back to your question, Dr. Ball.
Dr. Ball, what you're asking is, what do you need for us to move forward with a compensation plan, not all the other budget stuff right now, right? Because we have more budget meetings coming up.
Right.
And so for me, I want us to move forward with option 11, and I don't need any more information. So I'll lay it out like that. How's that?
Great way to lay it out. So what does everybody else need in order to keep the ball rolling?
Well, I'm still for option 9. I'll pass amendments every time to add whatever portion I think is important. So I will use portions of number 9. I still am committed to a 7% increase for our employees on the lower end of the pay scale, and I'll amend the budget with that. And we can get 6 no's on it if that's what it comes out to, but I need to do that. And so I don't want to go with option 11 because it's only 3% for increase?
6%.
I'm sorry, 6%?
6% except for administrators.
teachers. Okay, so thank you. I don't need to look further. I'm opposite of
Here,
you.
you can borrow these.
Okay, then we might be close.
Bill-
If you could move that to 7, I might be okay with that.
The fact that we're adding that auxiliary and clerical additional 1,000 makes it more, right? So what kind of percentage does that kind of come out to?
The $1,000 incentive
Yeah.
for, and we just kind of looked at a general.
Roughly, I know you're not going to be able to give
Is about an additional 9%.
an additional 9%.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you hear that, Mr. Macias? So they would come out better with option 11 than they would with option 9,
Correct.
because it does not include that additional 1,000 in
Correct.
option 9.
It just includes the ESSER incentive.
So more money in their pocket with option 11.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I now defer. I did not see that closely because it's a real small
Yeah,
print.
page 28 is.
But I tell you what, I can be comfortable with 11.
You can or cannot?
I can be, but I still will want to examine the salary adjustments. That's still something that's near, so we can work on that, as you said. So I can live with 11, and if the incentive, that $1,000 and so forth, let's weigh out that for sure, but that certainly then puts that extra percent there.
I'm sorry, keep one conversation so I don't miss, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry, what happened?
It's just, I'm trying to keep one conversation so it's all recorded, if you don't mind.
Oh,
So
okay.
can you just-
When y'all finish, I'll ask it again.
Okay, thanks, okay.
When y'all
I think I'm
finish.
done. You can go, Ms. Eden.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. Well, it's a question about cleaning the buses. And I was asking Bill why during the summer, they decreased the pay for the same job that they're doing during the school year. There's 2 different salaries for that. So you said it's because,
When they're driving, they get one salary. When they're doing something other than driving, they get a different rate.
so they, in the summer, they don't drive and clean like they do now?
Not all of them drive, no, ma'am.
So,
Some of
Okay.
them choose to drive, and then sometimes we don't have as many routes in the summer.
in the summer.
Yes, ma'am.
And so the pay goes down.
Yes.
Hmm.
If you wanted to see the incentives on page 24 and 25, we've tried to outline the incentives. We have the ESSER incentive that shows what we're doing there. And then the auxiliary clerical incentive, everybody gets the winter retention, which is with ESSER funds, but then only option 10 and 11 would get the additional 1,000 at the end of the year incentive.
I'd like to go back, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
To 11 again.
The mic.
Oh, sorry. Ms. Pichelle, what could we do to help you like 11? And then the same question will be for you, Mr. Diaz, if possible, so we could start to prepare more specific information.
I think I could go with option 11, knowing that that ESSER incentive is included. Yes, certainly.
Mr. Diaz, what additional information?
I'm going to think about it some more.
Okay.
I have nothing to request right now.
Excuse me?
I have nothing to request right now.
Okay. So just for clarification, oh, Ms. Eaton, yes,
Wait,
go ahead.
so okay, so like, on page 28, the $2,000 incentive for the bus drivers, that's going to be paid in 2 payments, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that
December
same
and
split
June. Yes, ma'am.
winter and then at the end of the school year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
And one thing I'll recommend, I know that we saw it last time, Bill, where you have an attendance aspect to it, 95% attendance.
Oh, yeah.
I did want to withdraw that portion of it.
If you notice, it is
Just
withdrawn.
want to make sure. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, because we were trying to figure out what 95% attendance rate meant.
We took that off.
Oh, good, thank you.
And I don't know if anybody heard clearly the comment, and Bill, correct me on my math. In regards to the auxiliary, the clerical, the police, the bus drivers, about the 6%, when you add the incentive, it truly comes out very close to 7%, right?
No, it's a 9.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for correcting me, I appreciate that. So it's actually better.
I said I could live with it. We're good.
I'm just checking, just checking.
The last piece of information I have is we talked about, what I got out of last week's meeting was people were more interested in looking at maybe adding additional teachers. So we looked at 3rd and 7th grade, and on page 30, just doing an average, right now we have a 24-to-1 student-teacher ratio in 3rd grade. If we added 20 additional teachers, that would take that to an 18-to-1. And it cost about $1.5 million. And then at 7th grade, we currently have a 29.5 student-to-teacher ratio in the core classes. If we added 10 teachers, that would take it to a 25-to-1 at a cost of $735,000.
So this is something that we could potentially stack.
We would hope we could find the teachers, yes. And like I said, we just picked those 2 grades because that's, I think, what your goals are. I know Nicole said 7th grade math could definitely use some help.
Oh, yeah. 3rd grade, too.
I think I'd like to see more teachers. I think we kind of are going to, in my opinion, I think this is something that our retention committee can probably look at. I don't think it's a decision to make tonight because I'm not sure that they're out there even if we wanted to add them. But I absolutely do think that we already have that waiver, class size waiver in our elementary schools.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it should be, the state says 22-to-1 and we're at 24-to-1.
Right.
And so for me, that's a priority if we get to a point where we are financially capable of fixing that. But also, that means we have to have room in the schools for it too.
Correct.
And to do that, we've got to have a bond and, and it's kind of that cascading thing. But I am always an advocate for returning elementary to what it should be, because if you've never taught kindergarten, you have no idea what a difference 2 kids makes in your classroom. And same thing, third, fourth, and fifth grade also, and I have a lot of experience at those grades. So I just think that maybe this is something to put on hold for now, until we can see what it looks like. But this is something we can also recruit later in the year too, assuming the people are out there.
Yes, ma'am.
My personal opinion.
Well, I think we definitely have some good information to go from. The last slide says questions or comments.
And I do have some.
Absolutely.
I'm still unconvinced that we do not need teacher aides, so I'm still going to look at adding something, but Ms. Canora may have one valid point where we might want to look at that after we study it a little more. In the meantime, we make teacher recruitment a priority, and to Mr. Diaz's point, what are we doing in terms of that? I'd like you to look at ESSER funds to see if we can move some of that to impact teacher recruitment specifically. This is our time. And I would even like the idea of creating an opportunity for individuals who want to pursue teaching to bring them in the doors, because this year we have a waiver, so they're coming in anyway. We want to cultivate that talent and get them on their certification pathway. So that could be a incentive. Sure. We'll help you with your teaching certification or whatnot. But that's what I'd like to look in terms of creativity. But there's 2 other areas that I'd like, and they're critical, everything's critical. Sure. But I'd like to look at stipends for addressing master's level versus, the stipend programs. If we have ability to adjust stipends for any area, that is still something of interest to me.
Right, and we are still planning on doing that. We still have other budget meetings, so that was next on the pipeline.
Okay, and the last thing is it's academic, but where are we having the most difficulty to the retention recruitment question with teachers? Are we unable to, elementary, because percentage-wise, what does that look like? Because I'm trying to get proactive in retention efforts, and when we have skilled teachers, I don't want to lose them to other districts. So I want to see if stipends might help or other type of incentives might help retain talent like that.
We'll bring you some data. So I know that that's what you would prefer, but I can tell you right now it's been such a strange year that it's been in elementary and also those specialty positions such as special ed, bilingual, but there's just been the general math also this year, but we'll bring you some information on that, Mr. Guidry, if you'll help me remind me.
Yeah, those would be my requests.
Thank you, sir. Ms. King?
It's just a stipend.
The stipends? Yes, ma'am. We have that coming up. Ms. Eaton? Any questions or comments? Just checking. I'm just checking with everybody so I don't pass anybody up.
I'm trying to, let me stop. I was sitting over here thinking about holding a marathon to raise money for the district. No, I'm good.
Okay.
Y'all don't realize, man, I know y'all working hard to answer all our questions and give us the information, but I worry about this.
Oh, we do too, ma'am. We do too. We do too. Mr. Diaz? Ms. Canoyer?
I'm good.
Ms. Bichelle? That's all we have then to offer at this time, ma'am.
Dr. Ball, right now, we only have one more budget meeting scheduled for June the 8th. Okay. Thank you.
Good luck. Well, when we'll do it.
Betty will send out some dates that were available after you and I talk, and then we'll set up some dates.
And if we need to cancel the finance meeting again, because this is all very finance specific, if we have a June meeting, I can't remember if we have one in June.
I have to look at my
But
calendar.
we don't? Okay, then we're fine.
But we'll get some dates that work for everybody. I know the board's very committed to meeting.
If there's no other business, then this meeting is adjourned at 7:34 PM. Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
Thank you for all your
Dr.
hard
Ball.
work.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
staff.
Mr. Guidry, thank you.